So, Tyler, we're going to start from the beginning.
Word.
So, where did cut and sew kind of begin for you?
Cut and sew began for me, honestly, not at the very beginning. Whenever I was a kid, I was really interested in clothes, and I thought someday I would own a clothing store, actually. And I got into designing clothes, but I never knew anything about the craft side of fashion, the actual making of the clothes. Um, that came a little later. I went to school in Savannah, Georgia for not even a full semester. Um, and when I got there, I told them I wanted to be a creative director because that's like the only word I heard, like on Instagram, I guess, of like,
Like to give it a title.
yeah, to give it a title.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, okay. They were like, so you have like a big portfolio ready to show us then? And I was like, nah. And they're like, oh, so you must be great at drawing then? I was like, no. They're like, oh, so you must be great at sewing then? I was like, no.
No,
They're
no.
like, all right, well, you're gonna have to either learn like how to draw really great to communicate your designs, or just like learn how to sew to make your designs.
Right.
And so I started taking sewing courses because in my mind it was like, okay, well, even if I learn how to draw, then I still have to get someone to make it. Or if I just learn how to sew, then at least I have a finished garment at the end of the day.
Right. So,
And I discovered through like sewing, those early sewing courses, how important it is to know how a garment's made before you start designing garments.
right.
And I really discovered my process of making clothes through that.
So what really got you into it? Like, so as a kid, I've seen in your past interviews, you said you didn't even know that people made clothes.
No, like I knew like grandmas and moms and stuff had sewing machines, but I thought that was just like for hobbies, like clothes like me and you are wearing right now, like
Mhm.
t-shirts, shorts, shoes and everything. I thought for sure that all of that was made by robots because I just couldn't imagine it. It seems crazy to me
Yeah.
that still that stuff's made by every single piece of clothing was made by a person.
Well, now
It's
that
insane.
you have a whole operation,
Hmm.
how does that like change your point of view on that?
Well, I mean, I understand now like what goes into it, and it makes me appreciate clothes way more. Even just like even something I wouldn't wear, like it's crazy like everything at the mall is like made by a person somewhere.
Yeah.
And so it really made me care more about how those people are paid and treated, because I feel like if I thought like clothes just like came out of a microwave essentially,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of other people probably think that too. They
Yeah.
don't really take into consideration like the the
The effort.
craftsmen and women behind
Yeah.
the clothes.
What so sorry. One second. Okay. So starting at an early point for you, what was really important for like character development and like how you want to present yourself and how you want to come off as a creator?
I mean, honestly, I never really thought about any of that. Like, I was just interested in clothes, and I didn't have that many friends or any friends that were really interested in fashion or the industry or had a favorite designer or anything. So I wasn't really thinking about that a lot. I was just like on YouTube and on Vogue and stuff, just like looking at shows and just Googling random designers. And I don't know, like I knew like all these designers kind of seemed like Marvel characters.
Yeah.
They all had their own like crazy
Their a whole
aesthetic or like
persona.
their own gimmick or whatever. But no, I never really thought about it. Like I think I was too naive to even like
Yeah.
think that hard.
Well, without you having any inspiration early on or really nobody to look up to like in
I had
person.
people to look up to. I just like didn't have like colleagues really, I didn't
Right.
have friends to jive off of, but there were people early on that I could draw like similar stories from, like other designers. I didn't know them. I
Right.
still don't even know them. But like a huge early designer I was inspired by was Jeremy Scott, because he's also just like a farm kid
Yeah.
from a rural place. And his stuff, like especially when I was younger, I was like, wow, this is like the craziest stuff, because his stuff's so theater,
Yeah, it's very authentic.
and it's just so theatrical. So it really caught my eye, and hearing his story, I was like, damn. So at least like it's possible,
Yeah. Seeing people like that, is that kind of what just gave you the inspiration to just try it yourself?
Yeah, and also like it goes back to me being naive. Like I I didn't even know like there were art schools. Like I didn't even know there were schools just for
Mhm.
just to learn fashion, just to learn design, just to learn how to paint. Like I didn't even know that. So I w- I was almost too dumb and excited to be afraid
Right.
of like, oh, like I
What
have
it
like a
really takes.
disadvantage. Like I didn't know I had a disadvantage
Right.
being from where I'm from. So
Well,
I don't know.
that's what I was about to get into. So you being from Lexington, do you think now, at the point you're at now, that you've kind of drawn more inspiration from your home and it's become more of an asset
Mhm.
than, a setback?
I feel like I always just draw inspiration from my surroundings, just naturally, like subconsciously. And so, whenever I moved back to Lexington during COVID for a year, I'd been living in New York and went back to Lexington. I feel like I was drawing much more inspiration from my roots in Lexington then when I was living in Lexington.
Mhm.
Now I've been living in LA for 2 years. I've met a whole new group of friends. I've been to like live shows and raves and stuff, like a whole culture I didn't even know existed.
Right.
And so I feel like just subconsciously now I'm drawing more from that because that's just like what I see.
Yeah.
But it's always like what's so cool is it's always like a melting pot. Like it doesn't just like do a 360 change. It's like there's always like that little bit of Lexington, that little bit of New York,
Right.
that little bit of LA, a little bit of Paris, like wherever I travel and the things I take in, like they just kind of blend together.
Yeah. With with you being at all these places, where do you think gave you the biggest jump, like going? Like was
What
it
do you mean by
LA?
jump?
Like when you got there, it gave you a big jump, whether it was inspiration, whether it was like the people around you, your surroundings. Like what area for your line of work gave you the biggest like push?
It's hard to say because I've gotten so many different pushes. Like whenever I first moved to Georgia, it was like a few days after I graduated and from high school, and that was a big push because it was like, okay, well now I'm on my own. I don't know a single person here. It just kind of like broke the cycle I was in high school, not
Right.
making the best decisions, and so that was a big push. But
Mhm.
then when I moved to New York, it was like, okay, well now I'm working around people that I was fans of on
Right.
Instagram, and so that's a big push because like it's more pressure, and it's just like it's
Mhm.
time to take shit more serious. And then it's like when I moved to LA, it was a big push because financially it was a big push because every house you can rent in LA costs
Yeah.
$1 trillion.
Oh
The
gosh, I can
studios cost
imagine.
$1 trillion. Food even costs $1 trillion. So it's like that's even a big push and motivation to like go harder.
Yeah, I mean
But
you got to be able to survive out there.
exactly. So it's really like different motivations and different changes, no matter where you go,
Right.
different chapters of life.
I wanted to so I've watched the majority of your interviews that you've already done. I really wanted, you've kind of skimmed over like your experience in Georgia, your experience in New York. I really want to take like a detailed approach of where your mind was at during all this. So you're getting out of high school. What's really pushing you to go to Georgia? Because I mean, that's not easy to be able to say, as soon as I graduate, I'm going to pick up
It's a
and kind of.
really rare story. So, like I said before, I didn't know art schools like even existed and stuff.
Mhm.
And so I was it's a sophomore, junior in high school. I forgot exactly what year. But one of my friends who for this story we'll call John, right?
John, okay.
All right. So John hits me up and he's like, "Yo, there's a play I need to hit in Georgia. I need to go pick up something, an unknown substance, right? I
Yeah.
need to go pick up this thing from Georgia. Um, are you down to drive? If you're down to drive, like, I'll smoke you out or something."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'm down." I mean, I was a
Fresh out of high school.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was in high school. I was
Oh,
like a
okay.
sophomore, junior, so I was like, I didn't, yeah, sure, whatever.
Fuck it, right?
So we drove to Georgia to Savannah, and he did what he needed to do. But while we were there, I was just like looking around, and I was just like, saw all these signs that said SCAD, SCAD, SCAD. It was like every fucking building said SCAD. And I was like, what is this? And it was like Savannah College of Art and Design. And I was joking around to him and I was like, yo, that's crazy. Like they really got a whole school
For art.
just for art.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
that's
being from
wild.
Lexington, I'm sure that was definitely like
Yeah.
kind of a shock.
Yeah. And it's like, I never even took art like in high school or anything. So
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, like that's funny, but also like that's sick. So we would go back to Lexington. I didn't really think much of it, whatever. And then later that year, they start asking you in high school, like, yo, where do you want to go to college? Like, you have to fill out these applications, like, blah, blah, just like stuff for class,
Yeah.
And so I just started writing like SCAD on everything because like that's just this random place I saw. But I hadn't like ever talked to them or anything. Like, I didn't know anything about
Oh, like you
SCAD
hadn't,
before that random trip.
Yeah. So in Georgia, so after Georgia, did you go directly to New York?
Yeah. So I dropped out of
And
SCAD
how long were you there?
like 60 school days.
60 school days. So roughly 2 months.
And yeah.
Why? What
But I
was,
stayed living on campus for like a year and a half
oh, okay. How
because
long?
the buildings at SCAD, a lot of them, especially the fashion building, it's 24 hours.
Mhm.
So after I dropped out, I would just go in at night, have one of the kids, like a student, scan me in, and then I would just use all the machines and stuff. Because
Oh,
at this
okay.
time, now I knew how to sew a little bit, but I didn't have any sewing machines or sergers or anything.
Right.
So I would just go in there, use the machines, use the thread, use like fabric out of the scrap bins,
Doing what you can.
doing
making it
what
work.
doing what I can, using the resources there, trying to get my money's worth of those loans I took out.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah,
So with you being there for 60 days, and like, you using all the equipment and stuff, where were you at in your creative process at that point? Like, did you have a brand? Like, where were you kind of?
I was just trying to,
Just
no, I
create
didn't
stuff?
have a brand or anything. I was just practicing. I was just
Yeah.
learning.
So
I was making stuff for myself, making stuff for the homies, making stuff for girls I thought was cute. Like,
yeah. Is that what a lot of it was at first? You really just like testing your waters and kind of trying to figure it out?
I mean, there was stuff I wanted to make. I just didn't know how to make it. So
Yeah.
I was just learning,
Right. So at what point did you kind of transition and say, I want to take this further. I don't want to just make stuff for my friends. I want to start, really creating pieces that I can start selling.
It really just came naturally. Like, I mean, at first, like I had a bunch of clothes and shoes from high school that I could just sell and pay rent. My rent was $250 and I was living in Georgia, so it wasn't that crazy. Like, it wasn't crazy at all to come up with. So I was just selling shoes, doing little things here and there, make some money. And then eventually it was just like, okay, like I want a bigger space to create in. I want to start buying my own fabrics. I want my own
Right.
sewing machine. I want this, I want that. So as I started doing that, I would start selling stuff. People would wear stuff, more people would want it. It was just like
Right.
word of mouth, just like in Savannah. Um, but I never like there was never a day where I sat down. I was just like, okay, like starting tomorrow is gonna be the day
I do a brand.
I'm gonna do a brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it kind of just naturally
Yeah.
came along. That's
Exactly.
really cool. So you spend a total of, you said, about a year and a half in Georgia.
Yeah.
So about a year and a half in Georgia, and then you go to New York.
Yep.
What are your first thoughts going to New York?
Well,
I mean, that's the big city, especially.
I wasn't going alone, so I'd been living in Savannah, and then I talked to Austin, Ass Pizza over the DMs. I was making these t-shirt puffer jackets at the time,
Mhm.
and how I used to do it is a kid would hit me up and commission one, and I would take a 50% deposit on it, and then make the jacket, and then he would pay the other 50%, and I would ship it.
Right.
So this dude hit me up, paid a 50% deposit. I made the jacket, and then he went ghost. So I just had this jacket, and so I sent Austin a picture of it because I was a huge fan, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Yo, just let me know your address, and I'll send this to you." And he was like, "Damn, these are crazy. We should run some Ass Pizza ones for a pop up I want to do on
Ooh.
Halloween." And I was like, "Yeah, that'd be sick." I was like, "Just let me know when to pull up to New York." And this conversation was at like 10:30 at night.
Okay.
So he was like, "You can just pull up ASAP." So I flew out to New York 10:30 the next morning.
Was it like I have to go now?
Yeah. Yeah. But I did that like for a bunch of things. Like
Right.
there were so many like smaller opportunities before that where it was like as soon as an opportunity presented itself, like I just jumped on it.
Yeah. How important
And
was that, or how important was that choice to take every opportunity possible?
oh, extremely. And I mean, it's like if you aren't taking opportunities presented to you, like I don't know. I mean, I didn't really have like another option. Like I was just chilling at the
Right.
house. So
Well, I mean, especially when you're starting off, you really are looking for any type of,
it's crazy though. Like I like offer some of these same opportunities to people now, and it's amazing how many people just like
well, I think a lot of
are
people
just
doubt
chilling.
themselves, or not only doubt themselves, they kind of doubt their skill,
Hmm.
or they don't see the potential in themselves.
Oh, I mean, dude, I was still learning. Like
Yeah.
I never even got close to being as good at sewing or the craft side of things as the people that I have working for me now.
Right.
Um, because at heart, I always just wanted to design things. I would I learned how to sew basically up until things were picture ready. They looked good on Instagram. I could get my idea out there, but I still never dove into the craft of making like a really beautifully technical product.
Right.
So even when I was working for Austin, like I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just like wanted to take every opportunity I could and figure it out as I went and surround myself with other people who were just doing the same thing.
Right. So I've heard you talk about Ass Pizza a lot, and how important was his role kind of in your come up?
It was extremely important. I mean, me and Austin first linked. I think the original plan was we were going to work for like 3 weeks getting these jackets made for a pop up, and then we worked well together, became friends, and we ended up working together for a minute.
A long time.
Yeah, for damn near like a year and a half or something.
So were you with him your whole time in New York?
Yeah, we were staying at the time his mom's house.
Okay. So what was some of the most important takeaways that you got from New York? And like what were some of the most important lessons that you learned while you were there? And also one more question, not to confuse you,
Hmm.
but you had I wanted to ask you about paying your dues because it seems like that's something that you really care about,
Yeah.
paying your dues. And you've mentioned that you were a soldier for Ass Pizza
Oh yeah.
Austin.
Oh yeah.
So
Big soldier lifestyle.
yes, sir. Can you explain to the fans kind of like what your role was for him and kind of how you transitioned, and now that you are in position to help people and have like people under you, how you kind of use that as inspiration?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the time it was just like me and Austin were just doing whatever we could. I mean, I didn't have any money, he didn't have a lot of money, and we were just working. I mean, I was staying in his mom's living room and sewing in the living room. Eventually, we moved to my parents' house in Lexington, and we're using the basement. And we brought in a couple more guys to help us there. And I mean, we were just doing what we could. But like the soldier lifestyle is really like it's just simple as that. It's like you do whatever you
Mhm.
need to do. Like you're not worried about like, oh, if I don't sleep this many hours a night is gonna or like, oh, I need to make sure like I take my day of rest. Like, I mean that shit's mad important, but there should be a period of your life where
You
you
gotta,
have to sacrifice that. You
yeah,
have to sacrifice being comfortable to get done what you need done. I mean, we got like 10 years of work done in 2 years.
kind of, you really just moved with the persona of like make it happen by any means kind of style.
Make it happen by any means because it's like also we knew the whole time it was bigger than the clothes. Like the clothes I was making at the time, like they weren't the best quality or like the best
Mhm.
sewn or anything like that. It was extremely DIY. And I think at the scale we were working at, definitely by like 2019, like we should have had a professional manufacturer be doing everything. But I think the fact that we did it the way we did it is historical, and I never want that to be forgotten because
Yeah.
DIY, like the DIY scene in the industry, will never be the same after
Well,
that.
oh yeah, and I want you to talk a little bit about the DIY process because you were at the beginning of kind of an era.
Hmm.
Can you explain how like the DIY was kind of thrown into the fashion world
Well, I mean, people have done DIY for forever, and a lot of these huge companies like take ideas from
from
just
DIY?
DIY
Yeah.
people. Yeah, and it's like the DIY stuff I really liked originally was stuff that people had to make because they had to make it. Whether that's like Japanese burro or feed sack clothes made by farmers in Kentucky. Um, it was DIY because you had to. It was just Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're
But
back.
now fashion companies got hip to that
They're
it's
trying
like
to do that.
cool. And
Yeah.
so now it's just like more of an aesthetic thing. But when I talk about the DIY scene, I'm talking about just like all the kids that were my age at the time, like
Right.
18, 19, 20, even younger than that, older than that. But just like they were all just on Instagram. They were all kind of making the same stuff. They weren't constructing full garments. They were
Yeah.
just like,
Piecing it together.
they weren't like formally trained, and they were just like, yeah, piecing stuff together, putting patches on stuff, like I don't know. We've all seen the set, but like sewing two t-shirts
Yeah.
together, like uh, people can talk shit about that like for forever, but I
Isn't
think it's so important that people are just like using their hands and trying to make
Yeah.
stuff because they could be outside doing something like not good, you know?
Right.
Like,
Isn't that kind of the important part, or like what makes like what you do so unique is the it not being a complete, well, now it's a little bit different, but at first, and when the scene kind of started to erupt, that it wasn't finished stuff. It kind of gave it
yeah,
that like
yeah. I mean,
that,
yeah,
that I don't want to say
just
raggedy look, but just
that
almost,
edge
yeah, that edge,
and
that
just that
edge.
authenticity. Like a kid made this because he loves it,
Yeah.
you know? Like you're not going to get that anywhere else.
Yeah. I heard you talk about how it makes you feel good when you see people have good moments in your clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah. How important is that for you to like kind of see people, or how happy does that make you seeing people have good moments in your clothes?
It's like, I want people happy when they're making my clothes. I want people happy when they're wearing my clothes. Just like that energy and just me being a tiny part of someone else's moment is it's just,
Yeah.
it's
It's
nice.
important. It's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's nice.
So now you're back in Lexington with Ass Pizza. Where do you kind of go from there?
Um, let's see. 2019.
That's like right
We
before
were
COVID.
back and forth from like Lexington to New York a bunch. We worked in Pennsylvania for like a month. We worked in this basement in New Jersey a little bit. And then we get this our first studio that was like just dedicated to work was in Jamaica, Queens. And we were working out of there for like, I don't know
How big was
how
that transition? Like from going to not having a studio
it
to having
wasn't
a
it
studio?
wasn't that big of a transition. Like it was still soldier lifestyle to the
Yeah.
max. Like the studio, we just had too much shit, so we needed a place to put it.
Right. You had more storage, or you
Uh,
needed more storage.
yeah. So, but it was still hectic as hell. But it was nice, having a place that was just for work, going back and forth from the crib to the studio.
Do
And
you
then COVID hit, and I came back to Lexington, and I thought I would be in Lexington for like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, because that's how long we all thought COVID was gonna last.
Yeah.
And then when it ended up like the lockdown or whatever the hell, it kept getting pushed back.
Yeah.
I just got my own studio in Lexington, and I would say that was like a huge transition because that transition of me getting a studio in Lexington was the transition of where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna start focusing on the Kentucky Boy Tyler stuff.
Right. Well, since you said that's where you started focusing on Kentucky Boy Tyler, why did you believe in Kentucky Boy Tyler when other people might not have believed in it? Like, what kept you going? What kept you pushing through it? Like I said, when other people might have not seen the vision.
I mean, the same thing of why people start. Like, I just wanted to make I just wanted to make clothes that didn't exist,
Right.
and yeah, and
All
it
right.
was fun, to work on my own stuff. I'd been working on Austin's stuff for a year and a half, and it was uh, it was like a new era for everyone, kind of when COVID started, for better or worse,
Right.
and people just locked in and were doing their thing, and I was doing the same thing. And
So when you really started focusing on yourself, what are some changes that you had to make to your lifestyle to like accommodate what you were trying to accomplish?
well, like whenever I first went out to New York, Austin's never smoked or drank or anything like that.
Mhm.
And I used to like smoke weed every day and shit. And whenever I first landed in New York and I found out he doesn't smoke or anything, I was like, oh, okay, then I'm not gonna smoke while I'm here. I'm staying at his mom's house, and I'm just gonna lock in and focus. So
Right.
I stopped smoking, stopped drinking, just went completely straight edge,
Was
and
that a big change for you mentally?
no, honestly, it was just like
Was it
I was just gonna do it like out of respect, and
Yeah,
then I just was like, oh, this is nice.
it kind of just
Yeah.
kept going. Yeah,
But no,
yeah.
I was so busy and shit, like I didn't have time to think about
You're not
it.
even thinking about it.
Yeah, I didn't have time to think
Yeah,
about it.
you're not thinking about getting fucked
But
up.
I
You're
definitely like think it's a good decision. I mean, when I used to smoke, it didn't really stop me from working. Like I
Mhm.
would smoke and then just like lock in and work, but
Yeah.
just like day to day, it's one less thing like you're worried about doing.
Yeah, I mean, truth be told, it is an activity you have to do. So
Mhm.
like every time you choose to smoke, every time you choose a drink, you have to go do that and like,
Mhm.
stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's like you could just get trapped on your phone and shit like
Yes, yes. Okay. So from starting Kentucky Boy Tyler, where you really started to focus on yourself, you're in Lexington. You have your own shop in Lexington. Where are you going from there?
from Lexington I went to LA.
LA. And then so like out where were you at right before you left? Like what did you have to tell yourself to make that move to LA? Because I mean, you coming back to your home and then going across the country to LA, I mean, that's a big step.
Well, I didn't like I moved to Lexington because like I said, like COVID was starting and I thought I was only going to be there for a month.
Mhm.
So then I was in Lexington for like a year. So at the end of the year, I mean, I have so many people that I love in Lexington,
Mhm.
but the resources to make clothing in
Yeah,
Lexington is barren if none. You know, you have Joann's and Michael's and it's like
that's about it.
that's it.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to go somewhere with the garment industry. So I was thinking about going to Austin, Texas, because Texas has a lot of manufacturing there. It's right on the border. I was thinking about going to Maine. A lot of brands get stuff made in Maine, like LL Bean and I don't know. I can't even think of anything else, but there's shit happening there. Um, and then it was either New York or LA. New York was still shut down like
Yeah.
crazy. It was still in full COVID mode.
Yeah.
And LA had just opened up. They ended up shutting back down, but it had
Yeah.
just
LA
opened
was
up. And so I was like, all right, like I'm just gonna go to LA because New York is closed, LA is open. I've lived in New York before. I had spent like a month at a time in LA before, but I'd never lived there.
like you never fully were there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's just do LA this time.
What are some of your favorite things and what are some of your like non-favorite things, some of the things you wish you didn't really have to deal with in the garment district?
In the garment district?
Yeah.
I love the garment district.
You love everything about it?
Yeah, it's such a special place.
Do you plan on staying in the garment district after you? Well, I know you're here temporarily, but do you plan on staying out there for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't live in the garment district. I live in like a quieter part of LA,
Yeah.
and then my studio is in the garment district. So it's a nice thing. Like in the garment district, I mean, that's like where Skid Row and everything is. So
Yeah.
it's like ground zero. It's hectic all the time there. So much noise, so much happening. So it's nice to come home at night and like work somewhere quiet.
Right.
But it's also nice to go to the studio and get woken up, you know,
By
by
all of
everything
the
going
yeah,
on.
yeah. I so do you think that it's kind of distracting sometimes cuz I've had that issue before where like I try to work at home.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that it's better to like be able to work at home or do you like having to go to a studio and really be able to separate the two?
I like I like having a space that's dedicated to work for sure, just because I like to keep my house like nice and picked up.
Yeah.
But I don't really get distracted by too much. I mean, I don't really do anything besides like what I'm doing. I mean, I might look at like furniture on my phone or something, but
Yeah.
it's like there's not too much I could get distracted by at the house. Like
You just
it,
work and having ideas.
yeah.
So speaking of ideas, I've heard you say in some of your past interviews that you're a creator. You're always having ideas.
Hmm.
How do you kind of pick and like weed through all your ideas?
Mm.
Pick what gets put out, pick what gets made, and then like kind of pick what gets put on the back burner or what doesn't get made.
It's just kind of instinctual. I mean, sometimes it's limitations, like there's always financial limitations of
Yeah.
what can get made and what can't get made. Sometimes it's time limitations. I don't have enough time or I don't have enough guys at the time to help me get made what needs made.
Mhm.
Um, but whenever I'm organizing like a next lookbook, for example, like
Yeah.
10 looks, I'll just go through all the lists. Like I just pull out my phone and write down an idea
Right.
any time of the day whenever I have an idea, and then I'll come back to it and refine it later that night. But whenever I'm getting ready for a lookbook or a next collection, I pull out that list and I just start taking things off and putting them together and seeing which ones go well together, which ones feed off the
Right.
other, and
What works, what
yeah,
doesn't work.
it's just kind of instinct.
Yeah. Another thing I've heard you say is, and I was I want to ask you more about this because I was kind of intrigued. You don't like giving up an idea. Like after you have finished a project or after you finish an idea, you kind of like to see how you can alter it.
Oh
Why
yeah,
did you take that approach? Because a lot of people don't do that. After they finish something, they kind of just, I'm done with it, so be it, and then they move on.
I feel like a lot of the ideas and stuff I come up with are textile based, like just figuring out how to make new textiles that
Mhm.
haven't existed, and I like to see how far I can take that because
Push the limit.
it becomes more of a signature than an idea.
Right.
So, instead of it being just like product, it's, a signature that can be used in a lot of different ways and explored
Mhm.
on a range of products, whether it's a couch or a pair of pants.
Yeah. So now that you're in LA, we'll go back to the whole story. Now that you're in LA, how long have you been in LA now?
Right now,
Yeah. Well, you
uh
currently still live in LA. You're just
yeah,
here
I
temporarily.
still have my place in LA right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I've had that spot for almost yeah, I've had that spot for 2 years.
2 years. So this is kind of part I'm really excited about. So why are you here temporarily right now? What do you got going on?
So, right now I'm here in Louisville, which I never spent much time in Louisville at all. Like, growing up in Lexington, I always thought Louisville was just the other Lexington, but
Yeah.
I couldn't be I couldn't be more wrong, honestly. Like, there's a lot happening here in Louisville and, so many things that I didn't know existed, and it's been a blessing to be working out here. But I have a friend who had a space, the space we're in right now, and he hit me up and was just like, "Yo, if you want to test the space out as a studio space, um, like pull up and test it out,
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna charge you or anything for a set amount of time, and just come see if it works." And so that was a huge blessing,
Oh yeah. I mean,
and
spaces like you said before aren't cheap. So
oh, they're not cheap, and it's just like, bro, it's such an investment because it's like not like you can figure out how to pay for it, but you never know where life's gonna take you. So if you sign that lease, like you're locked
oh
down there,
yeah,
you know.
for
You
sure.
could be a month in and then like something could happen where it's like, shit, like I need to live in Paris the next 9 months,
Yeah.
you know? And so it's like it was just a huge blessing how cool he was with everything. And so we've been working here um, I wanted to set up this studio as like the textile studio.
Mhm.
So have all the cut and sew still done in LA because that's where the garment district is,
Yeah.
and have all the custom textiles that I make for the garments made here.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've been doing. I mean, right now we're cutting and sewing too because we're getting ready for the runway show. But yeah,
I'd love to go. I'd love for you to go into as much detail as you can without,
yeah,
saying
about
too
the
much
show.
about it. So this is your first show, correct?
First show.
How excited are you? What are some things that you're really excited to like implement? Because it being your first show, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of ideas that you want to do, and then I'm sure there's some that you want to wait so you can
Hmm.
like kind of
Hmm.
cultivate this a show. I mean, this is definitely taking a new step, a new kind of a new alley for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge step. Definitely the biggest thing I've ever done. Like even just like financially the biggest thing I've ever done, the most I've ever shown at one time. But just a show is so important because it's the only time the designer really gets to show the whole vision. Like
Right.
on Instagram, like you can show a full look on Instagram, but it's still like, you have a white border
Yeah.
around your photo and you have text above and below it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's never right. It's not 3D. Like there isn't a set. There
Yeah.
isn't that energy of like the people around you. I feel like a show is truly like, even if it's
The
only
whole
10
experience.
minutes, it's just like that's the only time that a designer truly gets to
Yeah.
show the full vision of what they wanted to show with a collection.
Right. I've got a quick question, and I don't really remember where this question stems from, but I remember watching a video about somebody talking about fashion shows.
Hmm.
How much thought did you put into creating the set? around your pieces.
So this set, actually, I didn't have to create it. It just kind of naturally exists in the venue that the show's in.
And it
And
just matches your
that will make sense. That will make sense when
yeah.
you all see the show. But the very first day I was in Louisville, I went to what is now the venue, and I was just walking around in there, and I said to some of the guys working for me, I said, "Wow, this would be such a awesome place to have a fashion show." But I kind of just said it as a joke.
Yeah.
And then
It's like foreshadowing.
yeah, and then my friend Chelsea here in Louisville, she's like production management slash just like boss. Like she can get whatever you need done, she can get done.
Yeah.
So without her approaching me, she approached me a while ago and asked if I wanted to do a show, but at the time, like I didn't think I was ready
Yeah.
in any aspect, whether it's like, just resources wise. This time I said yes, like I thought like, okay, yeah, I might be able to pull it off now.
What happened in between there that made that
Just
difference?
years of working and learning,
Yeah.
really just learning. Like the first time she asked was a little a little over a year ago, and it was still hard to get together and just make like 10 looks for the lookbook.
Yeah.
So
How hard is it to make a full like for your show? How hard is it to make like you said it's the only time that as the uh, designer you can really have everything in one
mhm.
area and everybody see the whole thing. How hard is it to really create that for somebody that is coming to see it might not understand it, so you have to be able to make them understand that. How hard is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's I leave the clothes and the art and what I'm trying to show up to the viewer, you
Right.
know?
Kind of
I
leave it in the
mean,
air for however they interpret it.
I'll have show notes for the people there at the show,
Mhm.
but even the show notes are still pretty vague.
Yeah.
Like my team knows the backstory behind a lot of things,
Right.
but
Right. So here I want to ask you a little bit or some questions, some different questions. What are some of the people and things that have inspired you the most outside of like your living? Like maybe people, books. I heard you encourage people to read books, watch
mhm.
lectures. What are some of those truly inspiring things for you?
Like the people that inspire me.
Yeah.
Um, Tom Sachs is a huge inspiration to me. The way he runs his studio and just like his satire. I think he truly made like the handbook of like the soldier mentality
Yeah.
without knowing it. I mean, I every single person that works for me, I have them watch the video, The Hero's Journey by Tom Sachs on YouTube. And
Is
then
it
I
is it like an explanation of how to be a soldier?
that's like 10 bullets. That's like the next video. Yeah.
So
But I feel like these are just videos that I watched before I even worked for anybody.
right.
And I just like they really inspired me, and it just like made me feel like okay, there is somewhat of a blueprint here because
Yeah.
going into this job, very it can be very worrisome because of stability.
Yeah.
You never know what next week is going to bring. You never know what bill's going to pop up, what's going to happen, and there's never that like promise of money coming in, like you're not on a payroll.
Yeah.
So this was like this was like a good blueprint. The first blueprint that I saw where it was like, okay, other people have experienced this
Right.
and have, surpassed it through
Going
it, have conquered. So
right. Going back to talk about a little bit about your soldiers. What was it like kind of like just working with people and then transitioning to people or having people work for you? Because that's a big step, then you
oh
have to
yeah.
take people under your wing. You have to show them how to,
Oh yeah.
how to create your vision. It's
Yeah.
not simple.
It's the same thing as learning how to make clothes. Like when you start out, like you're not that great at it. And eventually like you learn how to communicate what you want to. So with the clothes, like you have an idea, but you're limited by how much you know how to sew,
Mhm.
your technical ability. And so that can be challenging to communicate the idea you want to communicate.
Yeah.
When you're training people how to make the clothes or
Right.
working with people, it's the same thing. At first, you're not that great at communicating the idea,
Yeah.
and then you get better and you work with each other more
Yeah.
and you form a stronger bond. And it's a whole different set of tasks and roles. I
Oh,
mean, like
100%.
what I do day to day now, I is not what I envisioned a few
Mhm.
years ago. You know,
If say you had to go back and talk to yourself a few years ago, what are some things that have happened that you would not have expected at all? Like just completely out of the random.
like what's some advice I would give to myself, maybe? What
Some
do you mean?
advice that you would give to yourself, or like just things that 3 years ago that you were thinking might happen,
Hmm.
or thinking that wouldn't happen but happened.
It's crazy. Like my goals 3 years ago, I feel like were so small thinking
Mhm.
like to now. Like I try to just set goals like for each year
Yeah.
now. Like this year, at the beginning of the year, everyone on the team was like, "So what's like the big goal for this year?" And I said, "I want to do some sort of presentation,
Mhm.
whether it's a runway or performance art piece or something like that. I
And
just
that's
want to
what
do a presentation."
the
So
show
that's what
turned
we're
into.
yeah, that's now runway show happening in a little over a month from now.
Dude, that's exciting. Super
Yeah.
exciting. What I know the show is what's on your mind now. What are some things that, now that you have a lot bigger dreams and stuff, what are some things that you want to happen in the future?
Like I said, I only set goals for every
The year.
every year.
Yeah.
I think next year my main goal is to learn more on the technical side of how women's wear is constructed, because we're doing
Women's
a
wear.
lot of women's wear for the show, and I have so many ideas for women's wear that I want to do, but
Yeah.
I'm not technically skilled in making women's
Women's
wear.
wear, yeah.
So I might even go like I've been trying to convince some of my friends to go back to school for a semester, and
Yeah.
like all of us just like pick a random fashion school and go to it for a semester, like well-known guys,
Yeah, that'd be super neat.
and it'd be really sick, but still working on convincing them.
How do you think you're going to convince them?
Just tell them it'll be fun.
Yeah. Man, going to school is kind of,
It would be fun because we're not like we wouldn't like I don't know, if I went back to school, like I'm not like worried about like passing. I'm
yeah,
not worried
yeah,
about like doing homework or getting a good job outside of school. So it's
yeah.
like every pressure of why you go to school, and also I could get any scholarship I want with the portfolio I have
Oh,
now.
yeah.
So it's like any pressure of going to school is off the table. So you're really just going, and it's just free knowledge,
Yeah, just to learn.
free game.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you go? All you have to do is dedicate time. And so I feel like that's a really cool thing that that people aren't really tapping into.
Yeah, that's a unique way of looking at it. I've
Yeah.
never heard somebody say it like that. All right. So this was a fun question. I feel like I feel like I accidentally stumbled upon this because this was like in the very last few minutes of like one of your longer episodes, something that people might not see. I heard you tell a story about where you snuck into a fashion show.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that story and
Yeah.
then who you met?
Yeah.
Oh,
I just told this story last night in depth to one of the guys who hadn't heard it. But yeah, so um in November of 2021, Virgil Abloh passed away. It was extremely sad. I've read the news just on Instagram that morning. He was one of my biggest inspirations, um, to me and like the whole generation of kids
yeah.
that,
I mean, he's a
yeah,
mogul.
yeah, yeah. And so I read that news and I was just like, oh, like that's so terrible. Like I think every single person in the entire house like cried.
Oh,
It was
wow.
so sad. And later that day, Louis Vuitton announced that they were still going to do the fashion show and
Mhm.
that it was in 2 days. And I was like, holy shit, like it's Virgil's last show.
Yeah.
Like
It's super legendary.
I have to figure out how to go. Yeah,
Right.
it'll never happen again.
Yeah.
You know, nothing that big will ever happen again. So I booked a flight to Miami with absolutely no
On the
plan.
spot.
On the spot that night. Flew out that night, landed in the morning in Miami. Did a pop-up with the store there. Me and them had been like collaborating at the time. And so did a pop-up, and then everyone that would come to the pop-up, I would ask like, yo, do you have any info on where the Louis show is? Because
Right.
there
They keep it
isn't
under
like
wraps.
yeah, and like yeah, the address isn't public. There's nothing public. Like, how are you supposed to sneak into something you don't even know the address?
Right.
So I'm telling like all these people like, all right, if you hear anything, please let me know. Like I was like so determined.
Yeah.
And then this one guy that was at the pop-up hits me up, and he was on the highway, and there was this SUV with like the Louis Vuitton logo on it from like the new collection. and it was like a black Escalade type thing.
You got the
And I told the guy, he like sent me a picture of it, and I said, just follow the car
yeah.
and like tell me where it goes. And so fast forward, we find out the address because of that. I pull up to the show, um, and so I'm not even gonna say his name, but I have a friend who's in the industry, and I knew for a fact that he was in LA at the time.
Mhm.
So my plan was, if I could find where the show was, I was just gonna walk up to the people, and when they ask my name, just tell them his name,
Yeah.
because I knew for a fact
He would have the
he
clearance.
probably would be invited, and he
Yeah.
for sure wasn't in Miami. So I do that, and they were like, "No, sorry, like you're not on the list." And so I was like,
Was that kind of heartbreaking? You're like,
yeah,
fuck.
because I hadn't even like I thought it was gonna be easy,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh shit." And so then I just waited around a little bit, and I paid. I walked up to the security guard, and I asked if I could just like pay them to get me in,
Yeah.
and she was like, "Yeah, sure." And so I Venmoed her an X amount of money, and then she was like, "So just chill here for a minute, and we're gonna let people in, and then when not that many people are going in, we'll
We'll
get you
kind of
in."
get you in there.
I
Yeah.
was like, "All right, sounds good." So I waited. The show is gonna start in like 15 minutes. Oh, by the way, this show's on a barge, like in the water.
Oh shit. So there's
So
really no way you can
it's like James Bond mission to sneak into the party.
like
So
you said,
I
you're determined.
determined.
Yeah.
Like there's one bridge
Yeah.
to cross, you know. So
One way in,
so
one
I
way
go
out.
in, so I go up to her. People are going in. There's only a few more people. I go up to her. She's like, "What's your name?" I tell her, and she's like, "Oh, sorry, you're not on the list."
After you paid her?
After I paid her.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
she was trying to scam you.
Yeah, she scammed me
Oh, that's
successfully.
fucked.
So then I'm just like walking around, and I'm like, "Oh shit, like what am I going to do?"
Your
And
ideas are running through your head. I know they were.
yeah. But about at that time, this dude like runs out of from behind security,
Mhm.
and he starts throwing up.
Oh shit.
And so security turns to him and starts helping him. The lady in like the Louis Vuitton uniform I originally talked to, I was taking names, like walks over and starts talking to him. And as soon as that happens, I just sprint
Took that
through,
opportunity.
yeah, just instantly,
Yeah.
no thought, just sprinted through the little gate thing, and got onto the barge. And like there was a lady that was asking me like what color my wristband was to see like where to seat me, and I was
Yeah.
just like, "Oh, I'm with the camera guys."
Yeah.
And so I walk over to the camera guys, and so I didn't have a seat. And so in like the live stream of the show and everything, you can just see me like awkwardly
Just standing there. Yeah.
standing there. But I knew like no matter what, I had to be there because
Yeah.
it's like so important.
It's such
I
a
only
legendary
met
time.
Virgil a few times. Both times were in Miami.
Mhm.
It was before like I ever even got to like work for anyone. Like I was
Yeah.
really just starting out. And you know, he was just huge inspiration, nicest guy in the world. So
What are some like having those conversations with him, and especially going to the show? What are some things that you took away from Virgil himself?
just like that the kids could really do it, you know. I mean, like Virgil, he had every resource in the world, and he still always encouraged people to do things DIY,
Yeah.
which I think is so important. Like there's so many people now who are like kind of turning on like that DIY mentality of like
The authenticity.
yeah, like, oh, like we're gonna try to scale it to this, we're gonna try to do this, we're gonna try to do that. And it's like, yeah, sure, like for business sake, like
Yeah.
scale it, but you can keep those DIY ethos alive, like
Yeah.
through every step of the process, you know. And I think Virgil's the best example of that. Like no one will have the resources he had, and he was still talking about DIY and keeping that culture alive
Yeah.
every day through so many workshops, so many lectures, so many Instagram posts. Like,
He was able to, like you said, he I obviously know who Virgil is, but I'm sure you know a lot more than me. He what I do know of him though, he definitely was able to reach a part of the youth that a lot of people can't. You
yeah,
know,
he was just relatable. He was like one of the first people in fashion where it was like a random
Mhm.
kid could connect to. It's like Jeremy Scott was one of the first fashion designers I found out about, and I thought like he was crazy and all the stuff he made was so theatrical and blah blah. But like I couldn't even begin to think of like what the first step is to make one of those pieces.
Right.
It's like Virgil made videos of like, this is how you screen print a shirt. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. And it's
Something
like,
that
and his like stuff, like you could see, and there's even a lecture he did. Like you can see the steps
yeah,
taken to get there. It has context to it.
and
It's
normally
not just like out of the blue this crazy thing that doesn't exist in like any world. It's like
right.
Virgil's stuff could live in any world.
Yeah. One thing I think that's super cool about Virgil is he's people in his position normally aren't open. They're not, they kind of
Yeah.
they shy away from showing people things.
Yeah.
They shy away from like giving out knowledge. But I
Yeah.
think that was super cool how he was always inspiring the youth.
Yeah, he believed in
Super
open
cool.
source.
Yes. Yes. So I got a few more questions for you, and then we'll do the walkthrough
Yeah.
and get a little idea of how you run your shop and everything.
Sounds good.
So, do you ever find it distracting looking at other other people's creations? Do you ever find yourself kind of getting lost in like not looking at other people's stuff, but just taking in too many outside sources?
No, I'm a huge fan of like so many things, like
Mhm.
mainly furniture.
Yeah.
Furniture design is like what I look at all day.
Speaking of which, did you design that couch in the music video for?
No,
No, you
the
didn't.
denim one.
No, yeah,
No,
I
didn't
saw it
make
and I
that.
was like, it looks exactly like your stuff.
No, I didn't make that.
All
I
right,
could have done it nicer.
you could have. I definitely believe that. All right, and then so I want to ask you, what are some emotions that you feel when your stuff is displayed at the highest level?
Like
Like,
the Met.
yeah, the Met. Obviously, without name dropping, you've worked with a lot of crazy artists. How does that make you feel,
I mean,
especially coming from Lexington, man?
it makes me feel great.
Yeah.
Like it's awesome, But I think the most important part about it is that I'm still not like up really, and like I'm making things happen. So I just think it like the most important thing about my stuff being shown to everyone, because I try to be so relatable, I try to help people out, I try to do whatever I can, is that the higher the level something is at, the bigger the platform, the more kids see it.
Right.
The more kids find me. And then as long as I keep that responsibility of wanting to keep an open source and help others and inspire that DIY mentality in people, the higher platform my stuff's shown at, the more people it helps.
That you can reach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you plan on taking that kind of approach that Virgil did throughout your whole entire process, no matter how big you get?
I always hope so, I always
So-
hope so.
We're at 52 minutes. Is there anything in this setting that you'd like to say to people watching from your side or people that might not know you from my side? Any advice you can give to people that are starting to make garments, or any type of advice you can give people?
I would just say, like, don't get so intimidated. Don't like try to go to like these YouTube videos and stuff. Like, they'll show you like a million different tools you need and blah, blah, blah. It's like, just pick one garment you want to make, figure out what you need to make it with. Like, borrow shit from people.
Yeah.
Don't go out and spend a bunch of money and like try to set up like a fucking craft room or some
Yeah.
shit. It's like,
Make it work with what you got.
make it work with what you got. And there are no excuses. Like, I didn't have a sewing machine when I was making jackets for Playboy Cardi. Like, I was still sneaking into the school I had dropped out of to make those jackets.
That's crazy.
So it's just like, just make it work. Like, there's always a way.
Yes, sir.
And if you don't think there is, hit me up and I'll tell you the way. 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 And I'll tell